Hi. Thanks, everyone. I have to start by saying it's incredibly cool to be sitting on the stage after having been somebody who'd sat there for a very long time. If you get to go backstage ever, do it. It's very cool back there. For the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to walk you through something that I think is super important for anybody who is developing a product, whether it's hardware, software, app, service, to think about. And that's how to create a product that people actually want to use. That seems like such an obvious and, of course we want to create a product that people want to use. But as a tech reporter for more than 20 years, I can tell you that lots of people don't actually make that their priority when they develop products. We're going to take you through a process that Alex has talked about with me that I think you'll all find interesting. And it starts with kind of what's in the name of this session, which is don't fall in love with the solution, fall in love with the problem. And it also plays off something that Guy Kawasaki said earlier. He was talking about Steve Jobs. I've been an Apple reporter for a very long time and had opportunities to interview him, Jobs that is, and Guy Kawasaki over the years. And the thing that people always ask me is what impressed you about Steve Jobs and Apple. And he understood something that anybody who writes understands, which is just because you can write something doesn't mean you should write it. Writing long is very easy. Writing short is super hard. And the first and most important thing you have to do after you organize your thoughts and get a good story together is edit and cut it down, because simple is super hard. So with that as the backdrop for this conversation, Alex,
yes.
You're the Chief Product Officer at Intuit, and you've told me that you're the first person at Intuit to have that title in all the years that Intuit has been around. Why?
That's a great question. So I think, so first, Chief Product Officer in our small business group. So Intuit has a consumer group and a small business group. And small business you can think of as QuickBooks. And I think, there aren't many 35-year-old software companies around at all. Intuit is one of those. And so we have a long track record of building great products. But they asked me to take on this role a little over a year ago, mainly because the most exciting things that we could do now are sort of the intersections between our different products. And with the rise of AI and ML and a lot of the other data that we have within the small business ecosystem, my job is really to start thinking about how do our products interact with each other and what are the new products we could create. So an example is a year ago we launched a direct lending product called QuickBooks Capital. That is really using all the data across all of our different products to build an algorithm that allows us to do lending better than anyone else. And so that's just an example of the seams between our different products that we can take advantage of.
So Intuit was seamless before? Because obviously you want to all work together. So
we had lots of seams, and they still show up to some of our customers. But part of building great products is giving autonomy to teams. But then at some point, those products have to work together because your customers don't come in and say, I want payroll in a silo that's different than I want accounting or I want payments. And so a lot of what I spend my time thinking about is what are the opportunities that work across.
So I've asked Alex to take you on a journey and tell you a story about how he developed a product. And the backdrop for that was a conversation we had back in November.
Yeah.
About how do you create something that people actually want to use. Again, the topic of this. And not to rely too heavily on the ghost of Steve Jobs, but he had a very great quote about this that I'm going to read as the setup for this conversation. Some people think design means how it looks. But of course, if you dig deeper, it's really how it works. Design is a funny word. If you dig deeper, again, it's really how it works. The design of the Mac wasn't what it looked like, although that was part of it. It was how it worked. To design something really well, you have to get it. You have to really grok what it's all about. It takes a passionate commitment to really thoroughly understanding something, chewing it up, and not just swallowing it quickly. So tell us the story of the product that you've developed that we're here to hear about.
Yeah, so the product is QuickBooks Selfemployed. It started in the most bizarre way possible, which was I was leading our platform at the time, and my boss, who was the GM of QuickBooks, called me in and said, congratulations, you are now the GM of a new business. And I said, fantastic, which business? And he goes, you've got to go figure that out. And I said, okay, well, what are the parameters? What do you need to do? He goes, I'm giving you nothing other than we need it to be massive growth driver. It has to generate a ton of revenue and give us millions and millions of new customers. Go. So that was really exciting for me. I've done a couple of startups before joining Intuit, and so that was exciting. At the same time, I was ridiculed by all of my peers at the company as the individual contributor general manager for a couple of weeks as I got things started. But we went out and we follow a very interesting process at Intuit that is really focused. We call it CDI, or customer-driven innovation. And so the first thing we did was look for what is the big customer problem, the unmet problem that we could solve really well and then build durable advantage around. And so I brought a team of amazing engineers together. There were about 3 engineers and a great product leader and a couple of great designers. And we went out and do a process that we do at Intuit all the time, which is really go talk to a lot of customers. And I'll go into more detail on that, but we really try to spend as much time as we can with the customer. And so we've got lots of small business customers. We went and tried to find the people that weren't using QuickBooks and found the patterns around them. And many of the folks that weren't using QuickBooks were small, really small businesses. And the pattern that we saw was that they were folks that didn't have any employees. They were folks that actually were independent contractors or what we called self-employed. And we went and talked to them and we asked them, what do you need? How come you didn't use QuickBooks? What were all the other things that we could have done for you? And they gave us like 50 different answers. And the problem is, without knowing it, your customers, if you just ask them that question, will often lie to you. They don't really know what they don't know. And so they would answer questions like, what's your biggest problem? Well, I need more money, right? And our team would immediately go to, well, so you need more customers. Yeah, I want more customers. Or I want to get paid more. Yeah, I pay more. And so we were falling into this trap of, you ask customers, they'll tell you what's on the top of their mind, but it might not be the problem that you need to go solve.
And just a reminder, customers are people. Just I want to point that out. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, they soon will become customers if you build the right product.
Right, but it starts with understanding people and how people
That's right.
work, how people think. I always tell my team when we write about tech, you're not writing about tech, you're writing about people.
That's right.
And how they're using tech.
And so on that point, what we do, and this will sound extremely creepy, so hang on for a second, but we implement a process at the company called Follow Me Homes. And we actually follow people home. And because they are people, and particularly these were folks that oftentimes are working out of their house, we went and did 50 different Follow Me Homes with self-employed that were working from home. And the value of that was we could ask them questions, but what was more important was we would actually just watch and observe. And the difference between when you ask a customer a question of what's your biggest pain or what do you need versus when you actually say, hey, just go about your day. Like, just get your work done, and we're just going to watch. Once you get over the creepy factor of you're sitting in someone's, side of their bedroom watching them work, you actually get all of the insights. And so this has been a process that we've gone through quite a bit.
And what did you learn? You said that people will tell you one thing, but actually what they want is something different.
Yeah.
That's hard to suss out.
Yeah.
How do you figure that out?
So again, watching and observing was a big difference. And we do a lot of compliance work, and QuickBooks is big in compliance. So we would ask people, tell us how you do your taxes, tell us how you do your expenses. And for the most part, they would say, oh, it all works out. I hire an accountant, and I throw receipts into a shoebox. And we would say, great, can we see the shoebox? And they'd bring it out, and they'd pull a receipt out. And on that receipt was, a printed thermal receipt that was now blank. And they would be like, oh, I guess the ink disappeared. And we're like, well, how are you going to get your deduction? And they're like, we don't know. And we'd say, well, show me how do you do your expense management? And I brought, you suggested I bring a prop. So what the most common thing was people would bring out a highlighter, and they would bring out their bank statements, and they would start highlighting different things. And we'd say, what are you doing? And they said, well, this is how I would separate out my business and personal expenses. Because I was told I can deduct my business expenses, but they're all in the same bank account, so I got to figure out how to do that. And for us, that was the big light bulb moment, was watching people go through this process and doing it and have no idea what they were actually highlighting. Or they would say, hey, this thing from Target, I can't remember if that was a business expense or not. I don't want to get audited, so I'll just forget about it. And we could just see while watching them that they were leaving money on the table.
I thought it was fascinating that they went to solve a problem on how to help self-employed people figure out their expenses, and what they solved for was the yellow highlighter.
Yeah, and so the first product that we delivered, the first version of QuickBooks Self-Employed, was essentially solving the highlighter. We called it Tinder for taxes. You connected your bank account. It brought in.
That's not creepy at all, by the way.
Well, after Follow Me Homes and Tinder for taxes, we got to make QuickBooks sexy. It's part of my job. You connected your bank account. You brought your accounts in, and with your finger, you were basically swiping left for business and right for personal. And we were saving people over $4,000 a year in expenses.
Yeah. So let's talk about how you got your team to embrace that thinking. Because I'm sure a lot of people here sit down and they have a great idea for a product. And great idea for a product, to me, is a euphemism for, oh my God, do we really need that? But great idea for a product, then you spec out how it's going to work. You go and you look at what other people in the market are doing. You're like, oh, well, they're doing that, so we can do this and make it different. That's very different than starting from someone's bedside table and looking at their shoebox. How do you get everyone on your team thinking of the problem and approaching it in the same way that you do, other than telling them if you don't do it, you'll be fired?
Yeah, well, I never tell them that. But there's two things that we did with this product in particular. One was, as much as possible, you've heard eat your own dog food. We actually had our team go out and be independent contractors, be self-employed, and it was super easy. Some folks would sign up to drive for Uber, some signed up for TaskRabbit. They were sort of becoming part of the economy so that they could figure out all the pain points that were happening when they had to go file their taxes at the end of the year or have to do expense management. So using the product was definitely number one. And number two, for many startups, maybe this will seem obvious, but for a large company, we have a whole customer success care department that answers the phone and helps our customers. What we tried to do is make sure that our engineers were really tight in answering the phone, because then they could talk to customers. And I can't overemphasize enough how close it's scary when your customers call, because they're going to yell at you and they're going to tell you all the things that you're doing wrong. As they should, but it's really empowering when your team is answering that phone and feels like, hey, I can just fix the problem on the fly. And the number of times we had engineers that were like, oh my God, I never thought of that. Can I put you on hold? Change something in the code and say, hey, hit refresh, and then hear the delight in customers' voices when they fix the problem.
Wait, so you were fixing their problems in real time in the code?
And it was so empowering for the team. So two things. One, eat your own dog food, or at least get out and use the product. And two, you can't, it's painful, but you can't be afraid to talk to customers, and everyone on the team should be talking to customers.
So tell us a story about something you changed.
Something we changed. So two parts. One is what we didn't change, which is a big part of actually one of the philosophies that we have at the company, which is you will hear from customers as soon as you put any product out all the things that it doesn't have. Right? And the first instinct is to go and build all those things, because it's great. Customers are telling you all the things that you need to do. We held a very hard line on solving the core problem first. If you believe you are on to a huge problem, and for us it was separating out that business and personal expenses, what I tell teams is you do not earn the right to go do the next thing until you have absolutely solved that problem first. And so we would hear things like, hey, I want to do mileage tracking. Hey, I want to do custom categories. Hey, help me with healthcare. And the team would be so excited about all those other things. But we really focused in and said, hey, we're not going to do that until we've nailed the core problem. Then we went on and built mileage tracking and invoicing and all the other things we did.
And what did you change going back to that?
The thing that we learned the most was in mileage tracking, we started with just having people enter in their miles. So if you drive for Uber, or if you drive for work, you're an independent contractor, you can deduct the miles that you drive. We put up nice part of the app where you could just type in your odometer, and we thought this will be so simple. People just type it in and do it automatically. And it turns out that people wouldn't do anything. So we had to do, the big change we had to do is do automatic mileage tracking. The tagline, and this is something, if you're entering into a market in which people are going from using nothing into using your product, you're trying to do that. The thing I call that is disrupting non-consumption. What I've told teams is, in order to disrupt non-consumption, actually get people to change behavior and do something, your product has to be easier than doing nothing. And that was a big aha moment for the team, was like, wait a second, they're actually doing nothing, and we have to build a product that's easier. So mileage tracking, having it be automatic, was something that we changed.
And I'm sorry, how is it automatic?
You just turn it on in the app, and we actually sense when you're driving, when you're going to a business location, and automatically deduct that for you. We've done the same thing with that swiping. You no longer have to do the tender for taxes. We actually know what your match is. So using AI and ML, we're able to come in and actually, as soon as you connect your bank account, we can say, here are all of your business transactions, and we've actually set them aside for you, and you're ready to do your taxes.
So I asked Intuit to quantify how well this app is doing, and I have some stats that I'll read for Alex, which is users on average found $7,400 in potential mile deductions per year by doing this automatic deduction. And I think it's interesting that if you would tell somebody you're going to save $7,400 a year by doing this, they still might not have done it, but by making it automatic, it's a gimme, right?
Yep.
A big part of developing a product is knowing what the story is and how to tell that story in a very succinct way. In journalism today, the optimal headline on any story is 63 characters. That includes spaces. So you have to be able to tell your story in 63 characters, thereabouts. You might go to 65 and go down to 60, but around 63. So I asked Alex to try to sum up what he wants to tell you in 63 characters.
I didn't count.
Okay.
But the title of this was talking about really falling in love with the customer problem. And many of you have heard that concept of falling in love with the customer problem. For me, and tomorrow's Valentine's Day, you got to kick it up to the next notch.
And this is not going to get creepy, right?
Well, it's going to get creepy.
Okay.
I think for teams, you have to build a team, and as a founder or as anyone on a team, you've got to go fatal attraction on the customer problem.
So you got to go fatal attraction on the customer problem. That might be a little bit longer than 63, but
fatal attraction on the customer problem. That's got to be 63.
That's a click-worthy clickbait headline right there.
There you go.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. Have a good conference. Thanks.
Thank you.
Fun.